How did you find this kind of spirituality, or how did it find you initially? Was there a turning point in your life?
Oh yeah, there's a few, and it's a
Okay.
fun story, so I'm
Okay.
so glad you asked. When I was 5 years old, my mom said I used to sit cross-legged on my bunk bed with my eyes rolled up in my head, and she had no idea what I was doing. My mother and father weren't particularly religious. My grandmother was a Baptist, so the first time I ever thought about God is when she sat me on her knee and she'd talk about Jesus, and she would have tears in her eyes. And I felt so much love from my grandmother that I couldn't help but love Jesus. So I kind of grew up with a love for Jesus, but never having too much religion shoved down my throat. Not that it's always shoved,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? I didn't have an indoctrination. I didn't have one theology that I grew up with. But Jesus would have been my first teacher. But even at 5 years old, I was meditating. And then in elementary school, instead of going to baseball, basketball, or softball, I went to yoga classes at the rec center. I had no interest in doing what the kids were doing. I had only interest in sitting and doing yoga and reading books like the Bhagavad Gita in junior high. And it's like, what on earth is he doing? Because that wasn't in my family necessarily.
Right.
And matter of fact, my family didn't even know to a large extent, except that I was going to yoga classes and trying different things. But at 8 years old, I went in for a tonsillectomy, and I had an allergic reaction to the anesthesia, and my heart and breathing stopped. I flatlined, and I left my body. Went into that dark and into the light, and all of a sudden I have an awareness of my body laying there on the operating table as they try to revive me. But I'm experiencing this incredible bliss, just indescribable bliss. And this would have been in the 60s, so people weren't talking about meditation and out-of-body experiences too much back then. So when I got back in, it was everything that I tried to explain or had questions about was really written off. Oh, he was hallucinating under the drugs, and it wasn't. He went unconscious. What really had happened, I become fully conscious, and so from that point on, I started searching. I started searching and searching and searching more and more. I just go off to churches on my own, or synagogues and mosques, and whatever I could find in this area. I grew up in Newport Beach in Cornell Mar, and started reading books in the library. And at 16, when I got my first car, it was a Volkswagen Beetle. I remember driving up the 395 at the backside of the Sierra Nevada mountains, up past Bishop, and went up to a place called the Palisades Glacier to do a bit of a vision quest. Just my backpack. Went up to the John Muir Woods wilderness and sat on top of a mountain, meditating and praying and beseeching God to reveal himself to me. I must have gone kind of kooky, But I got this epiphany up there. I got this tremendous sense of calling, like God had spoken to me. And the essence of what was given to me was that if I was to look into virtually everything in existence, then the truth could not be denied to me, you see, and this was part of my purpose. And so at the age of 16, I began writing my first book. It took 20 years in the making, where I virtually went in to study every major spiritual path and tradition in existence. So all the Eastern and Western religions, arcane teachings and mystery schools, shamanistic paths. I went out to the backwoods of Borneo and to Aboriginal tribes in Australia and Hopi Indians, and you name it, just taking everything in. Became a part of the Druid order and all the New Age stuff, Ekankar, Scientology, you name it. But because I'd always been really connected with the Eastern teachings of meditation, I spent a lot of time with different gurus, Zen gurus, Tibetan gurus, Chinese gurus, studied Taoism, different forms of basically any kind of meditation I could find. I started with TM, had visions of Sai Baba as a child. So my whole life has been kind of a story in itself, because it was filled with all these magical people, all these Babas and Bhagwan, Swamis and saints. That's what I filled my life with, and looking for, I then ended up with this book from Penguin. So a lot of the work I did over those first 20 years was searching to find what is out there. And I ended up sitting at the feet of a lot of enlightened beings, kind of guru hopping in India and trying different paths, different practices, weighing one against the other. I ended up spending 8 years with a Kundalini master from Tamil Nadu named Vettatri Maharishi, and apprenticed with him. I was groomed by him, brought him here to teach the yoga students I was teaching, and then more came because of him that I kind of took over when he went back to India. And so I was kind of prepared or groomed for being a spiritual teacher, working with energy, life force. And along the way, I ended up meeting Sri Shiva Bala Yogi Maharaj, who we just call Swamiji, who was the most powerful Shakti teacher in the world. You know, whenever you're around these different spiritual teachers, you've heard of Baba Muktananda.
Right.
Man, he had energy, and Guru Ma has energy, and Amaji has energy. If you've been around them,
Right.
you can feel their energy. Dr. Hawkins has energy too. You know, there's a lot of Westerners now starting to conduct Shakti, but nobody conducted Shakti like Shiva Bala Yogi. Man, you get a block within his presence and you couldn't even talk. You'd get so high. It was stronger than LSD. And so this is the guy that ended up taking me under his wing and grooming me. I spent 5 years training with him, going from city to city, and he would zap me and then have me go out into the crowd and zap people, because he doesn't usually touch people.
Mm-hmm.
He would just bless them from afar. So he would kind of conduct energy through me to conduct it to other people. So this is how this practice of Shaktipat meditation is used, which is at the forefront of what we teach.
Right.
We teach a lot of different forms of meditation, but the one that kind of distinguishes us is the use of Shaktipat. And so I ended up doing a yoga tapas training with him in India for a year, sitting 8 hours a day, and then moving it up to 20 hours a day, and finally up to 23 hours a day for 40 days and nights. I would just sit in samadhi with just his Shakti riveting my body, preparing me.
Mm.
And after I was installed as a guru in his lineage and asked to initiate on his behalf, which is when Self-Awareness Institute took off, he passed on. He went to Mahasamadhi. So the work we're doing now, which is interesting because the technological transformation that has occurred is simultaneously, it's like arcing with the shift in consciousness in the planet. And we're actually using that medium to reach tens of thousands of people all over the world. Shaktipat is being transmitted off of telephone lines, in teleconferences. It can be picked up through the internet. The energy can be conducted, I'm finding, many different ways. So it's kind of fun because we're kind of at the cutting edge of a lot of things. We're cutting edge in terms of awareness, because a lot of people have the words, they understand it, they've been there, they've read Deepak, they've done meditation before, they don't need to hear it, really. There's a lot of people at that stage, but they're not necessarily living in the kingdom. They haven't necessarily entered the kingdom of heaven lies within. That's like one of those universal truths. You don't have to be a Christian, and it's not a matter of believing it. When you hear it, there's some inner knowing. The kingdom of heaven does lie within, and when we connect with that, we enter into a state of grace. Mm-hmm. So what's beautiful about it is it transcends and encompasses all other teachings. Mm-hmm. It's not exclusive to, and it includes all and every.
That's great.